All right, I want to welcome everyone to today's program. Let me first introduce our speaker for today. His name's Terry Thomas. Most of you probably know him. A little bit about him. He joined the Air Force in 1966. And he was in for, it's down here somewhere, almost 30 years, I think. 24 years. And what he's going to be doing today is he's going to be talking about the Air Force One missions he went on, the presidential missions, and aircraft maintenance and modifications that he was involved with. And after retiring from the Air Force, he worked out at L3 for like another 17 odd years. And before retiring from that, and then he worked for the hotel business. That's how I got to know Terry. And now he's a city councilman for the city of Greenville. And he's done a million other things as well. And so without further ado, I thought I would welcome Terry.
Thanks, Susan. How nice of you. What's the trick, the magic? I want to introduce Greg. Greg, everybody knows Greg, but hi, my friend. I didn't see you back there. Well, the first person I want to introduce is my lovely bride and best friend, Vicki. 14 years, 156 days. That's going to win me some brownie points tonight. I might not have to cook.
Unless you're wrong.
Unless I'm wrong. Don't look at the recording.
Do you have the hours and minutes as well?
I was going to do that, but I was really afraid to do that part. Well, I thank you all for coming. I'm really humbled to stand in the Audie Murphy Museum, honestly. It's quite a tribute. On the program, it did say that I started off in the Air Force in 1966. And there's my friend. I want to say something about this guy right here. I do a lot of things in the city. It's because I love to do those as a servant. But here's a guy that doesn't live in the city and does as much as anybody that we have in the city. And he just completed the 10th annual Bob Wills Fiddle Festival. And I was a part of that when I was on the board. And there's a lot of work goes into that. So congratulations to you. I introduced her as my best friend. I'll introduce you as my second. Is that okay? Anyway, so in 1966, of course, the Vietnam War was going on really strong. And I wasn't evading the draft or anything like that because I'd actually gotten 2 draft notices and went on a bus with a bunch of yahoos all the way to Coral Gables, Florida. I lived in Clearwater, Florida at the time. And I was really not enthused about school. I made it through high school without any issues. I started junior college at St. Pete Junior College, and I still wasn't thrilled. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I had a 57 Chevrolet, and I chased girls and ran the beaches in Clearwater, Florida, and that was my ultimate goal, was to see how much fun I could have. So I really wasn't up to date on what was going on in Southeast Asia, honestly. I mean, I heard about it, saw it on TV and all that every night, but I didn't think I'd be a part of it. But when those draft notices started coming, I said, I better get smart and do something I want to do and maybe continue my education. And I know if I go in the service, regardless of what branch, they're going to make me do it. They're going to make me take advantage of that GI Bill as an active duty person. So 2 draft notices, 2 trips to Coral Gables. And my number, I had moved up the list. It was actually a numbering system, if some of you might recall that. And I had really moved up that ladder. And I said, boy, I know the Army and the Marines are going to be calling me any day. Went down, talked to a recruiter. He said, I'm going to fix you up. Buddy of mine went down there. He says, we're going to put you in the buddy system. You get to go to basic training together. You get to go to tech school together. Everything's going to be just jolly. Well, yeah, he's been there. And so we take off and do basic training. And as soon as that basic training was over and they were issuing orders that day when everybody gets orders the same day at the barracks, it was just like a flock of quail going a different direction. We never saw each other after that. So that tells you how good the buddy system worked. He goes somewhere way up in Michigan, St. Saul Marie or something like that, and I go over to Abilene. And like I said, never saw each other again during that 4 years. We had signed up for 4 years. So while in Abilene, I went ahead and said, okay, I'm gonna promise myself I'm gonna do the school thing. So I got enrolled in school again in the GI Bill there, and it was, I think, Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene, and started some school classes and different things. And let me back up just a teeny. The whole purpose, of course, when you're in a war, they're going to use you where they need you. And everybody had put in for different skills and things, and I really loved working on cars, playing with cars, taking motors out, putting motors in. Anything to do with a car, I'm in. And I said, well, I want to be an aircraft mechanic. Nothing sounded more exciting in the world than to be an aircraft mechanic, and maybe even fly all over the world. And we get our orders at the barracks that day. There's 60 people in a group of trainees. 55 went to rescue and fire protection. There were guys, of course, who wanted to go into communications. We had a guy that he knew he was going to be an aircraft controller. Didn't work. There was 5 out of that 60 that got to go where they wanted to go. So anyway, and I understood that, because when you're in a war, you put people where you need them. So on over to Abilene, we went to direct training. There was no tech school that was promised, hands-on training. And I wasn't crazy about being a crash rescue guy. Now, I definitely would not do the structural firefighting like the firemen in town and stuff. I had no inkling at all I wanted to be a fireman. But I was still part of, when it was around airplanes and stuff like that, that still kind of thrilled me. I wanted to be part of that. So into that tour, about 18 months, 2 years into that tour, I got orders for Southeast Asia. And of course, it was really hot then. I went there in 68, came back 13 months later in 69. And crash rescue was not the place to be in Vietnam. And so I came back to a place called Richards-Gebaur, Missouri. And when I arrive at this base, I see all these planes. They're going out of there left and right. And I didn't know the term then, I knew it later as I went through my Air Force career, what surging meant. That's when they try to fly the airplanes as many times as they can a day, either wear the airplane out or wear the pilots out. So I go up to personnel and I'm checking in and all that, and I said, wow, they're surging today. Or I might have used a different term because I didn't know what it was actually. And the guy looked at me kind of funny and said, I don't know why they sent you here. This base is closing. And I'm like, here we go again, another assignment miscue. And so I had a little bit of vacation time to use. I went home to Florida, talked to this other recruiter I knew, and I said, you know, I've got 11 months left in the service. I've done my part. I'm asking you guys one more time to do your part. I want to get in aircraft maintenance. And he said, well, I can't get you in right now. And he said, it's going to be a gamble. He said, I can probably get you in 10 or 11 months, but you're going to have to give up your time and grade. But he said, I think I can save your rank. I had made staff sergeant and made it pretty quickly, an E5. And he said, I think I can save that. And he says, I'm going to work on it for you. You go on back and finish up your time there, and we'll see what happens. Well, time came. I had already gotten orders back to Vietnam. And I had just met a young lady who I decided I was going to marry. I said, I'm not going back to Southeast Asia. I've had enough of that. And I'll see what this recruiter can do. So I get out of the Air Force after 4 years. And sure enough, to his promise, 11 months later, I get a phone call, really unexpectedly, because I thought I'd almost given up. He said, I've got you an assignment at tech school in Chanute, Illinois on B-52 bombers, which I didn't really want. But that was the only place they actually had jet over 2 engine schools at the time. They didn't have C-141s and things like that. They had the planes, but not the schools. So he said, I'm going to get you that school. I'm going to get you the airplane you want, which was a C-141 Starlifter. And I'm going to get you your base of choice. And I'm going to give you $7,000. He said, everybody, we're dying to get aircraft mechanics. And the people prior to that were telling me that, they had no places for me to go. So it was really, there was a lot of crazy things going on in the assignment world. But anyway, off to tech school I go through school, get down to Chanute. I am the happiest guy in the world. I mean, to Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina. Chanute was during the middle of winter, in the middle of right outside Chicago, Illinois, and it was the coldest place on earth, I think. It didn't matter because I was marching to a school every morning in all this crazy gear, trying not to freeze to death, but I was touching an airplane. I was so happy. Go to Charleston, South Carolina, the most beautiful place in the world for anybody. And of course, the missions out of South Carolina, South Carolina, were all over Europe and all over South America. And so I had to establish myself. Here I am brand new. I come out of a different career field. And I said, I'm going to work so hard at this and they had the thing called dedicated crew chief program. And the harder you worked at that, the better scores you got on your inspections from the quality control people. It was based on where you got to go on these trips with the crews. And when I saw that happening, I said, boy, I can see the target and I'm going for it. And so it was within about 6 or 7 months, I had already got on the first trip, which a lot of guys were waiting in line to get on this one particular trip. And it just kept getting better, and I just kept working harder. I just put more hours in. If it was an 8-hour shift, I'd go 10. If it was a 12-hour shift, I'd go 14 if it took it. But I just wanted to establish a reputation, have those guys trust me. And then the air crew started saying, hey, we want Terry Thomas to go with us because he'll take care of the airplane, take care of us. And so it was just a great assignment. But of course, like all assignments, they're limited. And the next thing I know, they're starting to move the C-5 Galaxy down from Dover Air Force Base, Delaware, to Charleston. And they said, you guys with C-141 experience, we're going to put you on the C-5. And that would have been fine, but it was either they were going to move him to Charleston for a short period, and they decided to move back to Dover. And I had been to Dover Air Force Base, Delaware, and I did not want to go back. And so they said, okay, if you don't want to go to Dover, you got one choice, go back overseas or go to Dover. I said, I'll just take my chances. I'll put in for Hawaii. Surely I'll get some choice at some point in my career. Kadena Air Base, Okinawa. And so tough times at Kadena. It was not taken over. The transition hadn't been made yet with the mainland. And there was water rationing and gas rationing. And we just had a brand new little baby boy. Couldn't move him over there for 6 months. So it was really kind of a tough assignment. But again, another opportunity to work a lot of hours and make a name for yourself. And so I did that. I'm building you up to how I got into the Air Force One business and that kind of thing. So while I'm at Okinawa, I win this pretty prestigious award. It's an Airman of the Month award for the base, but then I go to the wing and I win the wing level. Then I went to the division and won the division level. And that automatically set me up for the 12 outstanding airmen of the entire Air Force. And so the wing commander comes down to get me at work one day, and of course my boss said, the wing commander's coming to get you. The only time I ever saw the wing commander was a car going up and down the ramp and saluting it. I never thought I was going to ride in it. What was his name? I can't remember a name from yesterday, but I can remember this. And this comes into part of the story. Colonel Brettinger picks me up. Have a coffee and a donut. While we're transitioning from the flight line up to his office, this beautiful big white airplane pulls in. United States of America. I'm like, what is that? Here I am in the Air Force. I don't even know this airplane's in the inventory. And it happens to be the National Emergency Airborne Command Post, which is the first 747s the Air Force got online. And we're talking in the car and all that, and he says, Terry, that's what you need to be doing. You've got an outstanding record. You're moving up quickly now. You need to get on these new programs. Keep moving up, get on these new programs. Establish yourself. And so we leave there, and he says, I'm going to try to help you do that. We had a nice conversation. He says, I'm going to try to help you do that. So I go back to my regular routine, thinking I'm never going to hear from this guy again. So approximately 9 months to a year, Colonel Brettinger gets his permanent change of station orders, and he's gone. I don't see the guy again, never said a word to him. And I thought, well, if he was my go-to guy, he's gone. And so I'm waiting for my orders, and I'm still working hard, trying to do everything I can to move up. Well, I'd taken about a 3-year kind of a hiatus. I had made staff really, really quickly, but I couldn't make E6 because I wasn't studying. I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do. But when I got that big airman award, it kind of turned on a light, and I went to work for a guy in quality control. And he said, Terry, you're going to have to get off your butt and work at this. It's not going to be handed to you. And he said, I want you to come up here and at some point run the quality control department. And I knew that was impossible. There's too much rank between me and them. But he said, you have to do more than the average guy. Anyway, it was a really good kick in the butt and I needed it. So I started studying. I said, I'm going to study 5 days a week. Saturdays and Sundays are off when I wasn't working. And lo and behold, the first time I tested for tech sergeant, boom, I got it. I said, had plenty of points left over too. I said, wonder if that will work for master. Boom, same thing. So he was right. Pete Holton, Chief Master Sergeant Pete Holton was right. You know, just go a little extra, do the extra, and it's going to pay off. So still in Okinawa waiting for those orders. And I had no request for presidential support clearance paperwork thrown at me, nothing. And I'm waiting for those orders, hoping and praying that I'm going to see 89th Military Airlift Wing, Andrews Air Force Base. Well, the orders come down and they're to Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. And I'm like, well, thank you, Frederick Brittinger. And off I go to Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. Show up to the orderly room when I arrive at the base, and the guy's kind of looking through my paperwork, and he says, oh, you're the guy that's going to Andrews Air Force Base. And I'm like, I'm sitting in Omaha, Nebraska. And how's this play? How's this come into play? He said, you were selected to go to presidential training with the Presidential Airlift Group in the 89th Military Airlift Wing, Andrews Air Force Base. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding. So I'm only there 30 days and I start doing 69 to 89 day TDYs to Andrews Air Force Base. Training. What I did know was, and the 747s by this time were at Andrews, had been moved to Offutt Air Force Base. And not even connecting the dots, I thought, well, I'm going to Offutt, but they just got these 747s, and now I'm going back to Andrews. So what, you know, I'm not sure, I can't put all the pieces of the puzzle together. But somebody really had a plan. And so I'm doing all these TDYs, I'm going back and forth, and I get called up and said, you've been doing this now for 18 months, and we would like for you to take over a project where you'll go to the Boeing factory and help build the new airplane. And I thought, boy, that's pretty exciting. And there were only about 75 of us in our squadron of flight mechanics and mechanics at the time. It was very small. And what we didn't know was that the airplanes had been moved off it because it was a ballistic missile threat on the East Coast. At the time was secret. And obviously Washington, D.C. is on that target. Well, Omaha, Nebraska is also on that target, down the ladder a little ways. But anyway, when they moved the airplanes out there, these airplanes accompany the president everywhere he goes. I don't care where the president goes, in the United States, CONUS, or overseas, one of those airplanes is nearby for him because it is a war airplane. It's got everything on it you can imagine. And so I'm doing that training, and then I pick up the job going back and forth to Boeing, Seattle for 2 weeks out of every month, and doing presidential support trips. So it was tough. The schedule was very, very, very hard. I think 1 year TDY had 256 days TDY in 1 year. And they don't have a limit to that, by the way. And but I was having so much fun I couldn't stand it. Was going on numerous trips all the time. And this is progressing. I'm traveling, doing all the things I wanted to do. Had gotten my clearance, top secret, in Yankee White. They call it Yankee White for presidential clearance. And I get to knock on the door again and go see the squadron commander. He says, we got a job for you in Greenville, Texas. And I'm like, what? I don't know anything about Greenville, Texas. And I should have, because the RJs and stuff out here at the plant, that's still very, very active, is the biggest thing going on at now L3 Harris, still is, and was back then. But those airplanes were coming in cyclic for maintenance modifications and different things. So they decided to do the project here with Boeing and the Air Force because it was a place out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody would really know the presidential aircraft, although they were already coming to Greenville. we're going to be done here. So I had a 4-year stint of doing that and getting that airplane ready. And while this is going on, Reagan had ordered the new VC-25s, Air Force Ones. But he never got to fly on the airplane. It was really ironic. He never got to fly on one. He always flew on the VC-137s, which I was flying on, that and some other airplanes. But it was this is one story I love telling. While I'm here at Greenville in this 4-year period, 1981 to 1985, I get a call saying, we want you to go over to Waco to meet the PAG people, Presidential Airlift Group people. We're going to build a wide-body hangar in Waco, Texas at Chrysler Technologies. And I knew that Chrysler Technologies then was a part of E-Systems. They hadn't turned over yet to the new company they would end up being. And I said, they're going to build a wide-body hangar in Waco, Texas? And they said, yeah, we're going to build a wide-body hangar down there, and there's going to be a team there working out at a ranch called Crawford. And I'm not good at puzzles. And so I think it's ironic, though. Here's a governor of Texas going to run for the presidency, and they're already making these plans down there where he resides when he's on his vacations or whatever. Much like Reagan, we used to take Reagan to the ranch out in California to March Air Force Base. And much like that, that's where President Bush liked to hang out. But Reagan loved to go to the ranch because he had horses, loved to ride horses, take people out there, guests and stuff like that. And people used to say, Terry, that had to be real exciting going to March Air Force Base. Well, no, it wasn't. Because you were with the airplane and you got all these umbilicals hooked up to it and you're waiting for a call that he's got to either go somewhere or come to the airplane immediately and get out of there or whatever. So there were 7 and 10-day trips that came sometimes twice a month. And you just had to be on that airplane, on the ramp, just waiting, always waiting. We didn't get to go to the ranch or ride horses. And so, anyway, I'm going back and forth a little bit here. I apologize for that. So I'm in this 81 to 85 time frame at Greenville, and even got a couple calls. I went over to Abilene when President Reagan was dove hunting with a friend or something over there, and they wanted to take the opportunity to get him on the airborne command post and get him briefed so he knew what that airplane could do for him if in the event he needed it. And still going back and forth down to Waco and helping the Boeing CLS people, contractor logistics support people, put together a plan for supplies and things they needed to take care of an airplane while it was there. So that project was just about over, and I've got 2 years left on my enlistment.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting a lot of phone calls for trips because they know my time is about up for my clearance. And normally you're only going to be on the crew or a support crew for 4 years. Normally that's the deal, you're done. And there's a reason for that, security reasons and other things, clearances. But I had the 2 years left and I started bugging MPC down to Randolph Air Force Base, Texas. I said, what kind of chief slots you got? Now chiefs at the time, I had made chief and minimum time, first time. And so the chiefs group, another great assignment group within the Air Force, is supposed to, assignments, special assignments. And one problem with that is there's only 1% of the total enlisted force are chiefs. So there's only so many slots all over. So I said, got anything at Barksdale? No. Carswell? Fort Worth? No. So what do you have? Well, we got a place down in Florida called Tyndall in Panama City. And here I am, 2 years left. I can't say no. That's my 20-year commitment. And I had done and pretty much done everything I ever wanted to do. And I said, well, I'll go down there. It's a fighter wing, F-15 fighter wing. And I'll just learn a little bit about fighters, and I can stand on my head for two years, leave the family here, and commute back and forth, which I did. About 14 months into that tour, again, another opportunity to work your tail off because family was here. Besides playing golf on the weekends, it was flight line, do whatever you can do. And the wing commander took notice of that. I was getting ready to come home one time on vacation. And he said, Chief, we got a dining out tonight at so-and-so downtown. We did a lot of that. They had a wonderful military affairs committee. And General Myers said, we're going to go downtown to so-and-so tonight. He said, what are you going to do tomorrow? And I said, well, I'm actually going home. He says, oh, you're going to take leave? I said, no, sir, I'm going to be back Monday morning, bright and early, 5:30. So it was a 14-hour commute. And I would do that occasionally for special occasions, birthdays, holidays, things like that. He said, well, I called you up here because I want you to think about being my senior enlisted advisor. And I said, I had several reasons I didn't want to do that, because I knew I probably would have to extend my enlistment. And I also knew I was one of the youngest chiefs on the base, and I hadn't been to what they call charm school. And E9's chiefs had to go to this charm school for like 7 or 8 weeks or something like that, teach them protocol and what have you. And I reminded him of that, and he said, Terry, is there any reason you don't want to work for me? I said, no, sir. I said, please don't be offended. I just don't want you to get in a situation where some of the older chiefs are up here going, why'd you hire him and not me? I outrank him and everything else. He said, I don't want you to worry about that. He said, go home and think about this and come back and I'll see you Monday. So I worry about this all the way. I drive straight through to Greenville. I drive straight through back. I even leave home early to get back to where I can be at work at 5:30 in the morning. It's like 1 in the morning, and I go by my building, and on the building for the aircraft maintenance unit that I was running at the time, I had about 180 people in that unit. It had Chief Master Sergeant Terry Thomas, and had the OIC's name up there, my name, and 2 lieutenants. I drive down there, and I'm going to get some stuff out of the office and go back to the barracks, clean up again, change clothes to meet the general in the morning, and my name's not on the wall. I'm like, oh, did I screw up? I should have said, yes, sir, I want to work for you. Absolutely, thank you for the opportunity. So I decided to drive down the flight line to wing headquarters, and my name's on that building. So I show up at 5:30 in the morning, wait for him to come dancing in, which he did every morning right at 5:30, like clockwork. And he looked at me and smiled, and he says, I kind of made up your mind for you. And I said, well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I wanted to tell you I'd really like that job. And so I got to work with General Myers for almost a full year. And he ended up, by the way, becoming the Joint Chiefs of Staff for our whole military community. But anyway, so this is about 4 months left in my assignment with General Myers. He calls me in the office one day and he says, Chief, I want to talk to you about something. He said, I got a phone call from this guy at Randolph, and he said he's got a job for you in Greenville, Texas. Now, the general knew what was going on in Greenville, Texas, and he knew that my time was coming up to be done. And he said, well, this guy said it's a pretty cool job. He said it's going to be with the Presidential Airlift Group. You're going to be assigned at Bolling Air Force Base in Washington, D.C., and be traveling a lot back and forth there. But you're going to be assigned to Greenville, Texas. And he's smiling the whole time. This guy's a real character. And he knows my family's in Greenville, Texas. I just came from Greenville, Texas. I would die to go back to Greenville, Texas. But I got to give him 4 more years. But the coolest thing was, the folks at the 89th, I had to develop this real serious eye issue. Should never bring it up, right? And so they had grounded me. Well, the 89th, because they can do things that other units can't do, the 89th said, you know, we won't let you be a flight engineer on paper, but we can put you in Greenville and get you qualified on every airframe that we have down there doing aircraft maintenance, modifications, paint jobs, whatever it might be, and still travel. And sure enough, they did. Now, it wasn't it was a big deal for me to fly. I loved the flying part of it. It wasn't so much the flying pay. It really wasn't that much. Honest to God, it's not. But just the thrill of flying, and then to be able to do all these different aircraft. And so, sure enough, it's back to Greenville. 4 years of doing that, flying on everything you can imagine. Everything. In fact, some of the airplanes were assigned to the 89th, were stationed in places like Germany, Rhein-Main, Germany, and Ramstein, Germany, and places like that. And there were some other different aircraft assigned to Andrews also. They were stationed overseas for the NATO commanders. And so lucky me, I get to go through the whole process of the aircraft maintenance and mod, and that was my job, aircraft maintenance and mod manager. And then I would have to sell that to our quality department and the E-Systems quality department, and then take it to the customer and sell it to them. And so here I am, I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. And did that retired in 1991, and I was having more fun than I could stand. Well, the Air Force, of course, said, well, you got 24 in, you want to do 30? I said, no, I've done everything I can possibly do. There's no E-10s. I've got all the rank I'm possibly going to make, and I'm tired of traveling. I've traveled everywhere you can imagine. And I said, I think I'm going to dial it in. Well, it went along. After a couple of weeks, I had orders to Saudi Arabia or something like that. And I said, I'm not going to Saudi Arabia. So I got out, and some of you might remember the name here in the area, Glenn Cunningham. He ran the quality control department for special air mission projects out at the plant. He kept saying, Chief, what are you going to do when you retire? I said, well, I don't know. I'm going to go on a couple interviews. I got McDonnell Douglas has asked me to come to St. Louis, and Boeing's asked me to come up to Oklahoma City and work for them. So I said, I've never had an opportunity to have an interview, and I want to try that. He goes, well, it don't matter. And if you knew Glenn Cunningham, he's just funny and kind of semi-arrogant, somewhat. He said, you're going to work for me. And I said, well, okay, we'll see. And sure enough, he was right. He offered me a job I couldn't turn down. But did that for 7, I went to work. I actually retired on a Monday, took 3 or 4 days off, and the following Monday went to work for Glenn. And did that for 17 and a half years. And got on, that whole time was in special air missions. So it was Air Force One, Air Force Two, all the support aircraft that they have in the fleet up there. A lot of people don't realize there's a lot of airplanes involved with the Air Force One fleet. And today there's a lot of really new, nice airplanes you see on TV at night and all that kind of thing. But ironically, what's funny is I was going to get involved in the new VC-25, the second VC-25 series. 8 and 9,000 had been delivered. Like I said, Reagan never got to fly on them, which was really crazy. I never got to fly on the VC-25A, never did. But Boeing, poor Boeing, still, those airplanes are sitting in San Antonio, and I think they're like 3 years behind schedule right now, which they have another black eye for them, unfortunately, because they're a great company. They build a great airplane. But I was on another special project right at the end of my career, and it was odd, and I'm not going to throw anybody under a bus, but I know Vicki knows this. Engineering out there is the key and the heartbeat of that plant when it comes to big projects. There's some brilliant people out there. Well, the project they put me on was all about taking a used airplane, let's call it a used airplane, and making it a brand new airplane. 0 time in the airplane from the ground up, brand new. It's supposed to be 18 months per airplane. Before it was all over, it had been dwindled down to 14 months and couldn't get parts, couldn't get engineering drawings. And finally, I just was up working weekends with no parts, couldn't do anything to the airplane. The airplane's up on jacks and it's shored. And I got people going around the hangar pushing brooms. And I said, you know, when it becomes time and you're not having fun, I'm done. So I retired. And luckily for me, there was a fellow that had a couple of hotels in Greenville. And he asked me what I was going to do. We got to be very good friends because I loaded his hotels up all the time with flight crews. And I said, I'm not going to do a thing. I think I'm really going to start playing more golf and have some fun. And he said, come to work for me. And he said, I bought 3 new properties. I'm going to build 3 new hotels. And he said, 18 months. I'm just going to ask you to be a marketing guy. Because when I ended up out there, I was in business development marketing. And I said, okay, 18 months. 11 and a half years later, I'm marketing hotels. And then after that, I got involved a lot I was already involved a lot with the city and doing different things with the city. Worked for Greg in business development, ran the tourism board, decided to run for city council. And I'm on my 2nd term of city council right now, so. I should leave you some time for some questions. I went, 5 minutes over what I had planned. I did all this morning, by the way. I apologize. I know I got off skewed up a little bit a couple times. Questions?
Now, I know that the Air Force One, there's a lot of top secret things on it with that, but did you ever get, while you were in, get to work on some top secret projects that were later, like the stealth bomber and stuff like that?
I never got to work on projects like stealth bombers or anything like that, but you got to remember, everyone assigned to Air Force One to step foot on that airplane, to touch the airplane, you're going to have a top secret Yankee white clearance. You're not going to get near the airplane. Now, let me add something to that. It's a good question. When they sanitize or get the airplane ready for a trip, for instance, there's so much involved in that because the White House Military Office sets these trips up. A lot of them are pre-planned. Some of them are last-minute things. You got a natural disaster, something like that happens. They'll set that airplane up for a trip, and it starts getting names associated with it. Aircraft commander, co-pilot, flight engineer, stewards, security policemen, Secret Service, and all that goes on paper. And when they get that airplane ready for, let's say it's gone through its maintenance checks, they're actually doubled what you would on a normal airplane. You have 2 people performing the inspections and the maintenance, looking over your shoulder. Instead of like a 5-level technician, it could be a 5-level technician, but a 7-level, even though it's not a Red Cross, which is a condition that can cause serious problems on the airplane, it'll take a 7-level and another 9-level to sign that thing off in the forms. And there's a access list put out on the airplane every single morning, and it's got aircraft commander, Bob Ruddick, who was our presidential pilot when I was flying. He would have the flight engineer's name on there. There were key people that could access someone else, like another flight. There was 2 flight engineers, be myself and somebody else. Ron Shaw, if his name was on the access list for this particular date, Ron Shaw was the only guy that could say Terry Thomas or Mike Lynn could get on that airplane. Same thing with security police force. There were 5 security policemen. They're always on the airplane, well armed, by the way. It's that chief of those security policemen. Any changes to that list go through him. Even if it's the co-pilot on the airplane, it's going to go through Colonel Ruddick, and he says, yeah, it's okay. Danny Barr, who, by the way, used to live over in Mount Pleasant, is allowed access to the airplane. Once it's sanitized, doors are locked, nobody's going to get on it. And obviously there's reasons for that. But back to your point, that's the only thing that I ever worked on was big, heavy jets, with the exception of my assignment to Tyndall, and that was a hoot because it was F-15s. And my boss was an F-15 pilot. And so he'd say, Terry, what are you doing this weekend? I said, playing golf with the mole crickets. He said, oh, that's a shame because I'm going to take the jet down to Homestead down in Miami and see some buddies of mine spend the night. I said, well, that could change my mind. Maybe riding the F-15 down to a place or 2. So that was a lot of fun. Greg?
Terry, two great stories, maybe 3 that you told me. One was Ronald Reagan orange story.
Okay, yeah.
And the other one I love is the Chuck Yeager one.
Yeah.
And the third one, I think you told me this story about, didn't you go to Russia one time?
I did.
And you had to pick up a special person?
Yeah. We got time for that?
You want to tell real quick on those?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah,
I love
thanks.
those stories.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. Okay, we'll start off with the first one. So we went into Russia to Moscow, Leningrad, the Leningrad International Airport. And we drew the short straws. We took in the White House Communication Agency people, all the comm people. Now, remember, every time he travels, podiums, emblems, comm, lots of people, a lot of people involved. So we take these, I shouldn't use the word, overindulgent alcoholic drinkers on the airplane because they actually do put a pallet on the airplane just for them, for food and whatever they want to drink is consumed on the airplane. So we get them over there safely, and we're sitting around, and they would not let the secondary airplane stay in Russia. We had to leave the country, go back over to Rhine-Main, Germany. The primary stayed there, the crew. That would never leave the president alone. So a crew of people left there and went back to Rhine-Main. The other crew stayed in Leningrad, or Moscow. So one night, the crew were all together. We didn't have cell phones. and all that stuff, the beepers, stuff you have today. So you're at the hip with everybody. You can't go anywhere with that unless you're with the crew member. So we're at the base theater, and all the lights come on. They said, Colonel Caramelis and crew, please come to the front lobby. So we knew, we're in flight suits, we knew something's going on. So they made us rush back over into Leningrad. And they said, we have a patient, and we're gonna take 2 seats out of the airplane and put a litter in there, and we'll put a couple nurses on board. Now, let me back up again just a second. Going into Russia the first time, we had to have 2 Russian people in the cockpit with us. And they're talking Russian, but what they didn't know was the State Department made us put a crew, well, looked like a crew member, a Russian-speaking person in the cockpit to make sure they weren't pulling any shenanigans. So on the trip back into Leningrad, there was no insistence about Russian people being on the airplane with us. So we're like, so why has it got so lax to come back into the country at a different location and pick this supposedly sick person up? And they said, well, he's got to get back to the United States. He's really, really sick. They can't take care of him here in Russia. So we pull up, and here's this little funky, like you see on MASH, ambulance, comes backing up to the airplane. And nurses, and there were some Russian nurses, of course, and medic people. And we had our 2 nurses, female nurses on board. And they get him up, get him on the airplane, plug him into IVs and all that. And they said, take all the fuel you need coming out of Rhine-Main because you're not getting any fuel there. We want you in there and out of there as fast as you can get out of there. So as soon as he got on board, we were buckling up, closing the doors, and we're going. And we're in the cockpit just talking, we just taken off. I mean, it wasn't very long after takeoff. And the door, back then we didn't worry about the crew door. Everybody on board was secure. You knew who was on board. And the crew door opens up, and it's him. No IV sticking in him, but it's him. This is a guy we saw on a litter about 20 minutes ago. Well, and he's looked perfectly healthy to me, but didn't look like he had they said it was appendicitis or something like that. And, you can fix appendicitis almost any hospital, I would think. But he just said, gentlemen, I want to thank you for getting me out of the country. And the only thing nobody ever told us a thing. The ambassador to Russia met us at the airplane. He didn't tell us what was going on. He said, you just got to get him out of here. So our only thing that we could ever, in our minds think was this guy had to be a spy that was caught or suspected to be a spy possibly. And we got him back to Rhine-Main, and a nice, pretty black car picked him up. He wasn't a litter when he arrived. And off he went.
Who was president at the time?
That was Nixon. That was Nixon. That was the first presidential trip I went on.
So you don't know who the guy was?
Oh, I have no idea. None at all.
You don't have your cell phone to take pictures?
Yeah, that'd been nice, wouldn't it?
His first initial was C, middle I, last A, probably.
So, then the second story, let me think, was, Reagan. Reagan was down in Texas. And the story was he was dove hunting. I'm sure that's what he was doing. Well, he was dressed like it, for sure. Cowboy boots, blue jeans, hat, cowboy shirt. And I was here, and they said, you need to get over to Abilene. The airplane's over at Dyess Air Force Base. And they're gonna bring the Air Force One, the 7000. He was on tail number 7000. Because I remember coming in, taxiing in and stopping. They said, don't worry about fancying anything up. We're gonna have box lunches. They're not moving any china or silverware or nothing from the other airplane. He's just gonna get off 7000, get on the E-4B, and we're gonna take him back to Andrews. So I'm up in the aircraft getting the forms and everything ready. And I was gonna be the one signing the exceptional release for the airplane. I'm just going over the maintenance and the fuel and the load and all that kind of thing. And the airplane's got a spiral staircase, the E-4B does. And I hear somebody coming up the staircase, but I figure when they get him on the airplane, he's going straight into the NCA area, National Command Authority. That's his room. But no, he wanted to come upstairs to see what was going on. So I just happened to look down, and here comes this cowboy hat up the stairs, and I know it ain't a crew member. And so I don't know what to do. I'm sitting. It folds out 2 ways with 2 seats here, 2 seats over here. And I'm facing the cockpit door, and I've got the forms like this, working like that, and I see that cowboy hat, and I'm like, oh my God. I think I know who that is. And so he He comes up, sticks his hand out and says, "Hi, I'm Ronald Reagan." I wanted to say, really? Like I don't know that, you know. But he saw the box lunches on the table. This is the funniest part. Greg, that's why Greg laughed at it. So we call them box nasties. That's what we used to call them. There'd be a couple sandwiches there, an orange, apple, can of juice, sometimes a pop or something like that. And if you got lucky, it'd be a brownie or a cookie in there. And he just reaches in there. Now, the other guys are out doing some different things, and he reaches into the box and gets an orange. And now there's like a little hallway that goes down. There's 2, 4, 6, 8 seats in the airplane in the upper crew rest area. And right behind the second divider is 2 more bunks, 2 small bunks back, rest area. He takes this orange and just turns around and goes, and rolls it down the carpet. He said, you could bowl up here. This is cool. And right after he did that, the orange went to stay down there. And I don't know what he's going to do next. I'm kind of afraid to ask, And he said, I really want to look at the cockpit. Which way is it? He had no idea that the door was right there. There's a latrine there and then the door. And then another door that goes in the nav area compartment. He just wanted to go in there and say hello to the guys and thank them for the ride and all that. And it was crazy. I thought, this is the President of the United States,
So how many of the presidents did you actually get to meet?
3, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and Bush.
And out of all 3, which one was the nicest?
Absolutely Reagan. He was the nicest guy in the world. Now, I tell people this when I tell Reagan stories, because going to the ranch back and forth a lot. His wife was a trip. She was something else. But I'm going to tell you, and I've told Vicki this story 100 times, he would, if she was not on the airplane with him, which she was most of the time, he would write love letters to her. I mean those always hand in hand. But he would write, and I screwed up one time. Well, maybe more than once. They brought the airplane. We had the airplane was hot one time, come off a trip, and had to be delivered here for some maintenance. Had to be done real quick on it and turn it. So they left everything on the airplane, basically. I mean, all the cookware, the china, all the stuff, everything that's normally on a loaded airplane. We call it a full-up airplane. And he had written her a letter, and he had it over by the teletype for some reason. I don't know why. He had ended up by the teletype machine. But they left it. And I saw it, and I thought, man, I should take that. Then I thought, no, you take anything off that airplane, it could be bad news for you. And so I turned it into one of the other fellows on the crew, and they turned it in. But I thought, wouldn't that be cool to save that letter and have that as a kind of a keepsake, a memento? But I just spent some time with Victoria Yeager. In fact, I tried to get her to come here and do this today, but she was in Fort Worth doing something. Yeah. Anyway, so the taxpayers' money, got to be careful. This is election day. I promise never to mention election day, right? So we found it more economical to do a cross-training. We'd take a secondary crew and do a cross-country training flight and get the airplane washed. Now, 747 is a big airplane. It's hard to find car washes for them. So to wash that thing and then lubricate it, there's over 800 some fittings on the airplane, just in the flight controls and all over the airplane, landing gear. It's more economical to take the thing from Washington, D.C. or Offutt Air Force Base and fly it to Oakland, California, to World Airways, and have a contract with them to wash it and lube it overnight. Spend the night, crew spend the night, get in it the next morning, pre-flight it, crank it up, fly it down to Edwards. And the thought process was pretty good. These guys are pretty smart when you're spending your taxpayers' money. The shuttle crew, a lot of you might not know this, but the shuttle that was built to carry the Challenger, that 747 was modified right here in Greenville, Texas. And of course it was out at Edwards Air Force Base, California, where they kept it for maintenance and all that, everything else training. If that airplane was down, those guys couldn't get their 4 hours a month that they had to have to stay legal and current in their pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, whatever it might be. And so we would go out there and pick them up and fly around the flagpole, sometimes do aerial refueling. They never used the aerial refueling on the airplane, on their airplane, never did. And neither has the VC-25. It's never been aerial refueled, not even in tests. We always did it with our airplane because we were the guinea pig. But we pulled in there one day thinking we're picking up the shuttle crew. Take a couple guys up, do a couple touch and goes, go around the pattern, do a couple touch and goes, drop them off, head back to DC. Well, I look out the window and the Colonel Jim Pike ended up being one of my best friends, great aircraft commander. He said, "Chief, keep the airplane running," well, APU running. And so had everything going, really, just open the doors, pick up whoever we're going to pick up. Well, he got out of the airplane, which I thought was kind of odd, and went down, and I kind of leaned up from my seat to look out the window like this, and I see this kind of you're 36 feet up in the air from the cockpit anyway, but you look down there and this little teeny guy, looks like he's about that big. He's got the Air Force hat on and flight suit. I had no idea who it was. Pretty soon, here he comes up that spiral staircase. Jim Pike, Colonel Pike says, "Terry wants you to meet Chuck Yeager." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" The guy was not real friendly, I'll tell you that. Victoria, I'm sorry. But it's flying. The guy was all about flying. Now, obviously, if you look at the guy's track record.
All business.
Man, all business. When it come get in that cockpit, it was just radar focused. The most interesting thing was we never, ever let someone get in a right seat. Even when the aircraft commander's seasoned 747 guy, would you put somebody in the right seat and let them do a takeoff or landing, or even a touch and go? Not even a touch and go. We did that twice, went around the field, came in twice, let him do that. And Yeager, you're Brigadier General then, Brigadier General Yeager says, "Jim, can I try it?" He goes, "Yes, sir." Now, the first couple touch and goes on the 747, the flight engineer and the pilots got their hands on the throttles. And so you're watching those real close. And he said, you got the throttles? Do you think you got throttles? He said, "Oh, yeah." And sure enough, I'm telling you, on the third time around, that guy could land that airplane and take that airplane off. Never been in a simulator, not a 747 simulator. And we had to go to the simulator every year just to stay current. And they'd throw problems at you, try to mess you up.
He was a test pilot.
He was absolutely, that guy was magic. Absolutely magic. Yeah.
Do you still, kind of work on planes like your own? Do you have your own airplane?
No. When this eye condition thing came up, I used to fly every single weekend with different people who had planes out at the plant with the Aero Club and things like that. And it quickly, I had started on all these different medicines, and the FAA said, you're not going to fly anything. So it's fun still getting in the seat flying around people, but then it kind of wore off. You obviously still miss it. It's so much fun. But any other questions?
Well, they had the movie Air Force One.
Oh.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, how far-fetched was that compared to what you actually know?
So my best friend, Mike Lynn is his name. He lives over in Heath, and he was a flight engineer. And Mike somehow lucked out. Mike was the best talker in the world, and he ended up helping with that movie. He got permissive TDY to help with that movie. So anyway, your point, it was so phony. That whole thing is so phony. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. Shooting inside the airplane like that and bullets flying around. And even the way they set the airplane up in the compartments wasn't even close. Upper deck was, not the upper deck, but the mid deck was pretty close. But it was really comical. For anybody that knew the airplane, it was ridiculous. Yeah.
What I was thinking of is I think there was one scene where they put Harrison Ford into like a space capsule because they're going to inject him out so they could that way protect the president.
Yeah.
There anything like that on the Air Force?
No, not at all. The plane does have some classified defensive things on it that still today I can't talk about.
Yeah.
And they might have been even upgraded since then, I don't know, but no, there's no kind of escape pods or,
Where do you, I assume they don't have parachutes either.
and you can't jump out of 747.
Well,
No.
was there any time that during the Reagan administration or even the Bush administration before Desert Storm, was there any time that they had lifelike scenarios, or was there any kind of sensitive stuff that you like thought, oh, we're fixing to get into World War III, that you were in the airplane?
No, I tell you, I think that when President Bush pulled that first trip off, if you recall, that was all a head off the pillow. I want to go over there and see what's going on. I want to make a showing. And not so much just saying, I'm your president, I want to be there. He was indeed very, what the crews, I still talk to the crews. I keep in contact with some of the guys that aren't old and retired, like I am. And they said that he was just so focused on going over there and saying thank you to those folks. Yeah, it was really cool. I think it was a Thanksgiving too or something. He went over there and stood there and
Yeah.
slopped potatoes and beans and turkey around and had a big time, enjoyed it. But I'm gonna tell you, that's a target. That airplane is a target. There's and I think it's on YouTube, I'm not sure, but I did get to fly with this guy. He was he was the main guy behind Flying Bush. And I don't want to say anything derogatory on YouTube. But he explains the flights in and out of there with that airplane and what attitude he had to get the airplane at, and speed and all that. And I'm gonna tell you, it's right on the very,
Stalling out.
oh yeah, I mean, it was just, the guy could definitely handle the airplane, no doubt about it.
Well, when I was in Nam, Johnson did his surprise visit.
Mhm.
And to this day, it still floored me that his wife visited 5th Evac Hospital in Long Bend. And by coincidence, just happened to be at the helipad where she was brought in to do the walk through the hospital. All American personnel like myself, we weren't allowed to even stand on the outside perimeter of the helipad. They had Vietnamese daily hire who were paid 110 piastres a day, clipping grass with scissors. They could be there, but Americans who might say something that they didn't want them to hear, we couldn't be anywhere near them. They barely allowed me to take photographs with my I had a Nikon with a 135, and I was barely allowed to take pictures with those.
Yeah.
And we were absolutely, totally forbidden to be anywhere near that stuff. But I always, to this day, resent the fact daily hires, who their security was, they've hired them off the street, were allowed to be clipping grass, and we couldn't be within communication distance.
It brings to mind, and I know Susan's looking at me like, you're gonna shut up at the same point here. There is so much involved in those presidential visits, and what comes to mind is, I wasn't even gonna talk about this, but, because I think 47 was the total or something like that. What the planning that goes into those, it's called advanced parties. So every time he's going somewhere, there's a party that goes visits those places prior, if there's notice that it's gonna go. So it's a big contingent of people, and I love to go on those because your hands weren't tied. If you're with POTUS on the presidential trip, you better watch every P and Q that you do or say. But when you're on advanced party, you get to stay in most of the time the same hotels that he's going to stay in. But if you watch the checklist these guys are running, like Secret Service, things like, these aren't lies or exaggerations. When people say they go around and they weld sewer lids shut on the main routes of the trip, they lock out mailboxes so people can't put explosive devices in there. They look wherever there's a place where there could be snipers, and that's what still, I don't have a clue what happened with Trump. How that kid ever got away with that. We'll be hearing about that like we did Kennedy probably for another 100 years. But the thought process that goes into those advanced party trips is crazy. The fuel you put on the airplane is isolated like 2 weeks prior. You can't put that fuel on that airplane unless it goes through a series of tests. The stewards have to go out incognito and buy the groceries that they're going to put on the airplane. They don't wear their Air Force One gear. And they usually buy it in the local market up around Andrews Air Force Base and stock all the refrigerators and freezers and stuff at the Air Force One hangar. Just so, now there are trucks come in there every day like Coca-Cola or Starbucks or something like that, but it's stuff that you package, it's already prepackaged, pretty much 99.9% safe. But the planning is unbelievable, what goes into those, unbelievable.
Curious, Air Force One, Air Force Two, are they identical planes? Or?
Well, Air Force Two is actually designed for the First Lady
Okay,
and other senior cabinet officials.
okay.
It can be, I mean, two's normally, right now there's two VC-25As that's in service, 8 and 9,000. They're identical, right down to the nitty gritty, but neither one of them ever get designated two. The airplane you see the Vice President flying around on right now on TV, whole different series airplane. That's a modified.
Because she's on it.
Yeah, that's because she's on it. And of course, anytime the airplane, if the president gets on any airplane, it becomes one. Yeah. Well, thank you all. Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry, I went
Thank you
over.
so much. No, that was fascinating. Awesome. Cool. Next month's speaker is going to be Patrick from the British Flying Training School Museum from Terrell. And this Saturday is our Cotton Rural History Conference. And I think that's everything. Thank you all and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Susan.
This video has been brought to you by Juice. Juice is your community-owned provider for electric, internet, cable TV, and true local programming.